Welcome to the second episode of the daily podcast Wave of the Day by Smallest.ai. I'm your host, Emily, and with me is my brilliant co-host, Armin. Today, we're diving into something fascinating: how language models are becoming surprisingly good at learning multiple tasks without explicit training. Armin, this study from OpenAI really caught my attention.
It's quite remarkable, Emily. And you know what's particularly interesting? The traditional approach has always been to train AI models specifically for individual tasks like question answering or translation. But this research shows something completely different.
Tell me more. What makes this approach so different from what we're used to?
Well, instead of creating specialized models for each task, they developed something called GPT-2, which is essentially a massive language model trained on millions of web pages. And here's the cool part: it starts picking up how to do various tasks just by seeing examples in its training data, without anyone explicitly teaching it.
Wait, so you're telling me it just figures things out on its own? That sounds almost too good to be true. Can you give us an example?
Sure, so imagine you're reading different articles online. Some might include questions and answers, others might have translations from English to French, and others might contain summaries of longer texts. GPT-2 sees all these examples and starts learning the patterns of how these tasks work, just like a human might learn by observation.
That's fascinating. And how well does it actually perform? I mean, learning by observation is one thing, but doing these tasks effectively is another.
The results are quite impressive. For instance, on the Kokue dataset, which is a conversational question-answering task, GPT-2 achieved a score of 55 F1, matching or beating 3 out of 4 baseline systems. And here's the kicker: it did this without using any of the 127 0+ training examples that those other systems needed.
Hold up, you're saying it performed that well without specific training? That's mind-blowing. You know, it reminds me of how children learn language. They don't need explicit grammar lessons to start speaking. They pick it up from their environment.
Exactly. That's a great analogy, Emily. And what's really interesting is that the model's performance seems to scale with its size. The paper shows that as they made the model larger, it got better at these zero-shot tasks. That means tasks it wasn't specifically trained for in a log-linear fashion.
Speaking of size, how big are we talking here? What does it take to achieve these kinds of results?
The largest version of GPT-2 has 1.5 billion parameters. To put that in perspective, that's about 12 times larger than its predecessor, GPT. And with this size, it achieved state-of-the-art results on 7 out of 8 tested language modeling datasets without any task-specific fine-tuning.
Wow, but I have to ask, what are the limitations? Surely it's not perfect at everything it tries to do.
You raise a good point. While it shows impressive capabilities in many areas, it still struggles with certain tasks. For example, while it can generate coherent summaries, they're often not as precise or accurate as those created by specialized models. And there's also the challenge of ensuring the model's outputs are reliable and factual.
This opens up so many possibilities, but also raises important questions. Where do you see this technology heading? What might be the implications for how we develop AI systems in the future?
I think we're seeing a shift in how we approach AI development. Instead of building specialized systems for every task, we might move towards more general-purpose models that can adapt to different situations, similar to how humans learn. But it's crucial to remember that we're still in the early stages. These models still make mistakes and have limitations we need to understand and address.
This has been such an enlightening discussion. Before we wrap up, any final thoughts for our listeners about the significance of this research?
I think the key takeaway is that we're moving closer to AI systems that can learn more naturally, more like humans do. While we're not there yet, this research suggests a promising path forward. It's an exciting time in AI development, and I can't wait to see where this leads.
Thank you, Armin, for breaking this down so clearly. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into Wave of the Day. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.